My name is Elias Krell, and I am an academic, a musician, composer, performer, and also clairvoyant. um, those are sort of three balls that I keep in the air always in my life. And I teach at Vassar College and at Dartmouth College in women and gender studies and Latin American Latino studies, Africana studies, and music. So I'm here because I do work on queer of color and trans of color critique in music scholarship, and I've known Emily Wilburn for years now, I guess, and so I think she sent out the call and I immediately responded, like, yes, I want to be a part of this conversation. So my research is specifically on trans topics, as are many of the people who are here, and I'm interested in the sort of explosion on trans topics in the media as well as in the academy, and the sort of complicated racial, class, and imperial lines that are drawn and redrawn through that discourse, and how music in particular can kind of intervene to say something new or say something different, or and I'm particularly interested in how people on the ground, sort of in communities in North America and South America, navigate trans activisms through music and through performance. So that's what my research is on. That's what the book that I'm writing right now is on. So.
Do you see trans issues, trans scholarship reflected in music scholarship in general? Is it coming on in the same way that we see maybe trans issues starting to rise in terms of the visibility in media?
Yeah, absolutely. And people have been doing scholarship on trans before it even exploded, right? Like Sheena Golden Pershbecker, who just presented, published a dissertation in 2008 that included at least one chapter that really specifically talked about transgender voice, right? And so, but now it's really kind of blossoming. The critique that I have and other trans of color scholars are making, and that this conference is really sort of organized around, is what is being talked about and what isn't, right? And in what ways does the explosion around trans topics potentially reinforce and elide questions of race and class, right, that aren't sexy and new, that we kind of, that many people want to get away from in a sort of implicit, universalizing way. And so how do we enjoy the explosion and the newness of this topic while also talking about what enables it to emerge as explosive and new, that's absolutely old and part of the fabric of both Canada and the U.S. as settler colonies, right? And how to tease out that tension through music is really exciting to me. And I think we're doing an amazing job of it at this conference, not to pat all of us on the back, but I think I'm really excited by the conversations that we're having so far, and it just started, so can't wait to see what else transpires.
Can I pick up on that a little bit? Just you mentioned Canada and the U.S. Specifically, and I know that one of the things that Eddie is interested to find out too is whether there's a particular, whether you have thoughts about Canada's relationship to these issues as distinct from, say, American perspectives on the issues that are being covered at this conference, and whether there's a specific, any thoughts, I guess, about having the conference here in Canada that maybe inform the issues in a different way?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think it's one that I have more to learn about than to offer. But what I can say is that I think in particular conversations around Indigenous people's rights are more prevalent here. That there's like even the institutionalization of recognizing that we're on ceded land, right? And naming the communities whose land this is that's not something that I've come across in the States, right? And so there's a conversation. The conversation is certainly different. in that sense. And I think it gets us out of the U.S. American bubble, just even geographically, to be outside of the U.S. Right, having this conversation I think is really key to the conversations that we're having, because the U.S. is such a media bubble, and it's a bubble that affects Canada, right, and Latin America, and the entire world. To various extents, right? And so there is something I think really important and transgressive about having the conversation outside, while also using U.S. queer and trans of color scholars who are contesting contesting what makes up a nation to begin with, right? Contesting the ideas that that national boundaries are fixed, right? But thinking them more as practices, as performances, as entities, imaginary entities that are instantiated through these minutiae of, small, everything from a small act to an institutionalized, like regimented, these are the steps you must go through to become a citizen, right? Like in between those are all of these different manifestations of nation. So that's what I'll say about that. But I'm sure that I would love to have a longer conversation with you about this at some point.
Yeah.
Would have a different perspective on that.
Yeah.